And welcome to this week's edition of Reigns on the Cardinals podcast. Rob Reigns alongside Mike Reigns coming to you from our STL Sports Page studio. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. We took the week off from the podcast, but back obviously with a lot to talk about today. I guess in one way this is kind of a winter meetings preview of the winter meetings getting started this weekend down in Dallas. Cardinals hopefully will be very active. The meeting's otherwise known as the Juan Soto sweepstakes. It does sound like we're going to maybe have some kind of resolution on his status here within the next few days, maybe right around the start of the meetings, which then hopefully will free up the logjam for some other news.
Hopefully it will. It's definitely going to be a very busy upcoming week, busy weekend starting on Sunday with the winter meetings. And all indications are that Juan Soto is going to eliminate teams and make a decision before then. And is that $600 million? Is that $650 million? Whatever that number ends up being, should hopefully allow the other teams to move in the direction knowing whether they got him or didn't.
And I guess it's a little bit different feeling for the Cardinals when you know there's absolutely no chance that you're one of the teams that Juan Soto is considering.
And I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that.
I mean, don't get me wrong. He's a very good player. And would I like to have him on this team? Yes. But do I want to lock in for 13 years at $650 million? Probably not. Yeah. Occasionally those contracts work out. It's worked out pretty well for Bryce Harper and the Phillies both, right? Mm-hmm. But look back to a few years ago to Alfonso Soriano and the Cubs, and how'd that work out?
Yeah, I think you could make a case of a lot more of those long-term contracts not working out than did. Albert Pujols and the Angels. A couple of years were pretty good, but not the rest of them. So
correct.
So we'll see what happens with that. And then obviously, I think there is some news with some of the other free agents that are kind of obviously waiting to see where he goes, to see who has money left to spend on their future. And I think in one sense, some of those at least a couple of those free agent moves are also going to be, connected to the Cardinals at least in one sense, in that if the players the Cardinals are trying to trade, to some of the other clubs, if some of those other clubs have an interest in one of those free agents, they may be holding off on trade talks until they see what happens.
It will be a very busy and active week. It always is around the winter meetings. It's just a question of, are the Cardinals going to be one of those teams or not?
One thing I will be safely predicting, and I think I can say this 100% accurately, I'm sure the Cardinals will do a lot of talking. How much acting they do will be wait to be seen. And that in part also becomes who you talk to and what those people have to say to you. I mean, the Cardinals could very well have a long list of here's what we'd like to do. The players we'd like to trade, the players we would want to keep, players on other teams that we are interested in acquiring. But you can't do it by yourself. You have to have somebody else agreeing with what you want to do.
Exactly, for sure. And you got to find a suitable trade partner, and whoever that may be. And I can all but guarantee you at the end of the day, John Mozeliak's comments at the end are going to be, well, we kicked the tires on a lot of things, but nothing really made the right move for us, and we'll keep looking at it and seeing. Now, maybe we come out here and we make a big splash move. Maybe we trade one of the key guys that you want us to trade.
If we do get some news, of course, we'll have a special edition of the Reigns on the Cardinals podcast to discuss whatever happens in those first part of the week down in Dallas. But I think the thing, too, is I think the first name that has to be on John Mozeliak's mind, on Chaim Bloom's mind, as the Cardinals look to if they are going to go through with this reset plan that we've heard about now for a couple months since the end of the regular season, Nolan Arenado has got to be the first name that they're talking about.
The biggest question that they have to get figured out, and I think they have to know this before they go start talking to other teams, are exactly what you just said, this reset. Are we planning on worrying about this year, or are we focused long-term 3 to 5 years from now and developing these kids to let them see where we get to? What is their focus? Do they want to win this year, or do they want to win 3 years from now?
What they have said is that they're willing to take a step back, at least in terms of contending this year, to kind of focus on the future and see what they have. How much they actually will carry through with that, I think that's a question we can't answer.
To me, with Nolan Arenado still on this team, this is a team that can win this year. Mm-hmm. So the question is, how important is that for them? Do they want to try to compete with the Dodgers and the Yankees and some of these other guys this year, or do they want to develop these kids into long-term success for 3 to 5 years?
Maybe that depends on what you find out in your talks as you bring up Nolan Arenado's name with other teams. How much are they willing to give you for him? How much of the contract would the Cardinals have to eat to get somebody to take on Arenado?
That's what I was going to say. That to me, the money is the bigger conversation around Arenado's contract is, because the Rockies are still paying some of it too.
A little bit.
So
yeah.
Are the Cardinals willing to eat salary in order to get a better prospect? Or are they just looking to cut the salary and cut the money,
$74 million is what he's owed total, including what part of it that the Rockies are paying over the next 3 years, starting next year when he turns 34 in April. And I think, to me, the thing is, even if you're not number one, how much of the contract you agree to eat will obviously dictate the prospects that you would get in return. But to me, if you can get somebody that's willing to take on the majority of that contract, I'm okay with almost not getting much in return, because you've made a big improvement to your club by freeing up all of that money.
Well, we just made 3 wonderful trades during the season last year. They got nothing for them, basically.
They have experience doing that,
with the exception of Eric Fetty. So we have experience doing that, yes. So the question, it really just comes down to is, are they more concerned with this season, and are they more concerned with Arenado helping some of the development of these younger kids, or are they looking to get the younger kids more playing time?
Yeah, I think all of those are very viable questions. And the other forced situation that you have to realize when you're looking at the challenge of what to do with Nolan Arenado is not only the salary, it's the fact that he has a full no-trade clause. So you're not going to trade him to somewhere that he doesn't want to go. I know there's been some national speculation. I think it was on ESPN or one of those places earlier this week. Thought Toronto was a great fit. I can't see Nolan Arenado agreeing to go to Toronto.
I cannot either, no.
I saw Detroit. I can't see him agreeing to go to Detroit. To me, it would have to be a big market club. It'd have to be a club that obviously could afford the salary, could afford maybe for him to be like more of a contributing player than the star player on the lineup, and a team that has a really good chance to win.
To me, the biggest challenge there is when you look at these teams, there's probably only, maybe 10 teams at most that he would agree to go to.
I picked out 5.
And I'm stretching with 10, right? Because
5 that I think would have a legitimate interest in him. There might be more that he would be willing to go to.
The problem with those 5 that you're picking out, and I don't even know who they are off the top of my head, but I can almost guarantee you, most of them already have pretty sure things at third base. Mm-hmm. So that becomes the question mark is, do they think Arenado offers them something they don't already have?
Well, there are 3 or 4 that I think you could say have a need at third base. I'll tell you, the Dodgers are number 1. Do they have a need at third base? No, probably not. But they also have had for several years a fascination with Nolan Arenado, that they'd like to see him playing third base for the Dodgers.
But I wouldn't play him over Max Muncy.
Yeah. But where could you play Muncy somewhere else?
His other base is first base. Well, Freddie's playing there, so.
And he's not DHing with Ohtani DHing.
He's not Ohtani. So,
where's
he going to go?
So maybe you're rule out the Dodgers.
You also got Kiki Hernandez. So what do you?
So you got Seattle. Could say at third base there. You got Philadelphia if they trade Alec Bohm. You've got the Yankees always coming into play. The Red Sox have talked about moving Rafael Devers to first base so he could play third base in Boston. Those are the clubs I think make the most sense. Will any of them happen? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think you're looking at teams that are willing to spend money, and that's a short list. But most of those teams, Phillies, you just said they have to trade Alec Bohm to do something. The Yankees, he's not starting over Jazz Chisholm. So
but Chisholm's going to play somewhere else.
And he could, for sure. I'm just saying, I think the options are slowly dwindling.
And that's what makes it hard. That's why trade is going to be hard. Because the other thing is we just mentioned too, you've got 2 other guys. One is a third baseman, one who's been a shortstop who could play third on the free agent market, who teams would rather have than Nolan Arenado, and that's Alex Bregman or Willy Adames. So I think you may have to clubs figure out if they're in the market for one of those 2 guys as a free agent. They're going to be waiting on them before they do anything with Arenado too. So just the fact that the Cardinals are going to go to these meetings trying to trade Nolan Arenado, I don't think guarantees that they're going to make that trade this week, but hopefully they'll have a lot more information available to them at the end of the week than they had at the start of the week, and know if a deal might be possible coming up in the next couple of months.
Hopefully, yes. And
I think the same thing is true with the other player. I think there's another player that could really play a key role in this whole Cardinal reset if they decide to do that. You could trade this one and probably would have a much bigger market of available teams interested in him and could bring a lot better package of prospects in return, and that's Ryan Helsley.
And you and I have differing opinions on this one as well, because I don't think in any way, shape, or form you trade Ryan Helsley right now, because you need protection in the back end of that bullpen. So my question for you is, if you trade Ryan Helsley, who's your closer next year?
I would give you an obvious answer is that I would think the guy's probably not on the roster right now.
And that's a safe bet.
Of the 2 guys, of the people who are on the roster right now, I would think you look at Ryan Fernandez, who has the stuff to do that. I think maybe not the experience yet. And I think Matthew Libator could also be a guy who could do that if he was not going to be a candidate for your rotation. But I would bet that the guy who probably would lead the Cardinals in saves in 2025, if it's not Ryan Helsley, is not currently on the roster.
And that would make the most sense, because if you look at the stats from last year, you look at inherited runners scored, right? And that's one of the most important stats. So Ryan Fernandez, in 32 inherited runners, only 10 scored, 31%. Matthew Libator, 33 inherited, 10 scored, 30%. So that's a much better number than some of these others out there. But Ryan Helsley's number, 0. He didn't allow a single inherited runner to score all year.
Part of that also was how he was used, though. Because he came into a lot of start clean innings.
And I get it; it's a different situation for sure.
But I want to make one thing clear. I don't have anything against Ryan Helsley. Obviously, record-breaking year, terrific job. I think ranks right up there with the most elite closers in the game right now. But I think that my argument for thinking that now is the best time to trade him is there's several points to it. Number one is he's coming off the best year of his career. Will he be able to pitch that well again in 2025? I don't know. Relief pitchers always have a tendency to go up and down a little bit, and they also have a tendency at some point to have injury problems, which Helsley has had in the past as well. So my point is, I think right now he's at the peak trade value that he would ever have. A free agent after 2025. He's already going to stand, if he goes through arbitration this year, to make probably at least $8 million this season. If he becomes a free agent, that number is going to go even higher. Do you think the Cardinals are going to be in the market to pay a closer $10 million or more a year? They never have in the past.
Well, and I guess that depends on who's on this team, right? Or where the money all lies, right? To me, the question mark is, if you really want to reset and have these young kids play, then sure, maybe it makes sense to trade him. But if you want to try to win this year,
right,
your bullpen is a key piece. When right now, 3/5 of your starting rotation is very questionable on how many runs they're going to give up a game. So having a lockdown bullpen is going to be even more important when you got guys with a 13.5 ERA still starting this season.
And that's the other argument to make too, though. Is if you don't think you're going to be a contending team, and based on what they have said publicly, at least back at the start of this whole process, they don't consider themselves a contending team. They say they're willing to take a step back. Then how much value does Ryan Helsley have to your team? Okay, he's going to save a lot. If you're only going to win 80 games, maybe he's going to save 45 of them. But how many of those 80 wins would you get without him as your closer? I mean, that's all a question I can't answer. But I'm saying that to me is what they have, the factors that they have to weigh, and it could very well come down to, do they they have to set a certain level of prospects that they want to get if they move him, and if they can't get to that level of prospects, then they hold on to him.
And the other question becomes, do they feel they can get more prospects for him now or in July?
Depends on if he's healthy.
And it depends on if he's healthy, if he's winning. Are there contending teams that need a closer that didn't need a closer right now because they didn't know they were going to play so well? So, I think there's a lot of factors on when the right time to do it is. But to me, the biggest, I'm more worried about our starting pitching and the fact that they're not going to be able to shut anybody down. So you need a bullpen that can slow I don't want to say stop the bleeding, but can slow it down.
I guess I'm more looking at the bigger, longer term view than what happens in 2025.
And that's what they've said they're doing, right? Yeah. That's what the reset option is, right? So if you want to reset and start over, then yes, you want to trade Arenado, you want to trade Helsley, and you want to try to look at how we can best prepare to win in 3 to 5 years down the road. Well, to me, I think this team can win this year, because the other thing you got to remember is this division hasn't gotten a whole lot better.
Correct.
There's not a whole lot out there what?
You're right.
The Brewers won the division, but Adames is going to go somewhere else. He's not going to go back there.
Possibly trading Devin Williams too.
And there's some other options there of guys that could mix and match, but I'm not so far. I'm not convinced that anyone in the Central has done enough to have a commanding lead out there, right?
But here again, let's go back to the Arenado thing. Helsley, I think we agree on, is better than anybody right now the Cardinals could probably plug into that closer role. If you plug in Nolan Arenado's numbers from 2024, don't you think there's some options that the Cardinals have that could be just as good at that position as what he did? Now, could he potentially do more because he's done in the past? Yeah, but I don't think we can promise that.
And I think that's what someone needs to figure out, is which Arenado is going to be here. Is it the Arenado's that's a top 5 MVP caliber player and has won a platinum gold glove? Or is it the guy who was here the first half of the season who was making countless errors and not running out, grounders to first and things, and just kind of had a negative attitude?
And what will his attitude be if the club is not performing well. If they're playing under 500 for the first half of the season, is he going to be a distraction in the clubhouse?
But if he's playing well and the team's not playing well, does that give them more options to trade him than they do now?
All too time will tell on all of those things as the Cardinals head to Dallas to start the winter meetings. Of course, we'll have all the action covered for you, whatever does happen down there. Mike Raines, Rob Raines here on STL Sports Page. Appreciate you tuning in to our Raines on the Cardinals podcast, brought to you, of course, by our friends at Drury Hotels, Archwell Health, AAA Travel of Missouri, all of our other great sponsors who keep this and all of the other content on our website totally free to all of our readers, all of our listeners. Of course, you get it wherever you get all your normal podcasts material, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, all of those things. Of course, the other things, I'm sure the Cardinals will have some other trade conversations down there as well. Another guy that I think they probably would like to move if they can is Steven Matz. And then you've got a pitcher named Miles Michaelis. Oh, yeah, he's got a no-trade clause contract too.
And those are the two guys to me that I'm more worried about in this rotation because Michaelis just didn't – there was not really a start or even a stretch last year where he showed you that he could really compete at a high level. I mean, every time he went out, he was giving out 4 or 5 runs, and I don't think that's going to cut it this year. So I think Michaelis is one you're really worried about. And Matz has shown glimpses. At times he looks really good, and at times he's looked up and down. But he's another guy who's pretty injury prone, and so is somebody willing to take a chance on him? And like we've said before, if you want to reset, you got to pave the way for some of these guys to start.
You've got to have some openings in that rotation for some of your young pitchers.
And the guy that I'll never understand, but Michael McGreevy pitched so well last year and never got a shot, but we kept running out Michaelis in his 13 ERA, and that's not helping anybody.
You'd like to think that he wasn't out there simply because of his contract, but I think he was.
And I think he was too. And this team legitimately had a shot to win, and they kept running Michaelis out there when McGreevy – all he did was pitch exceptionally well in the 2 starts they gave him.
And you got 2 guys coming who, whether they're here at the start of the season or not, I can pretty well predict that they will be pitching in St. Louis by July, in Quinn Matthews and Tink Hentz. So there's 2 more guys that you need to have.
And all 3 of them are projected long-term starters. That's how they've come up through the system. They're all ready to go. So do you take a chance and just say, we're going to move some of these older guys and let the 3 young guns?
I would love to see them do it. I'd love to see this club go young. Get rid of a lot of the older players, clear out those contracts. Maybe it's a tough year this year, but we've gone through a couple of tough years the last 2 years too. And if you can see promise, if you can see hope in the future, I think fans will be okay with it.
And I'm not convinced it's going to be a tough year because
a
lot of these kids
good.
Can play.
I think they can,
and a lot of them are really good. The one comment that people have said about the Cardinals over the years is that we tend to overvalue our own talent. Mm-hmm. Well, if that's the case, let's overvalue them and let them play this year. Let's see what they got.
Look in the list of top 100 prospects in baseball and see where these guys' names are and realize it's not just the Cardinals who think they're pretty good.
I agree. And I think it's, every time most of them have been up here, McGreevy's really the only one that's had a long-term, I don't want to say long-term, but just a decent shot. And he didn't even really have that much of a shot.
Graceffo hasn't had a look yet.
Not at all.
I mean, so maybe he's a bullpen candidate too, maybe, So one other thing about the winter meetings to point out too, before we go kind of have some other conversation about a couple other issues with the Cardinals, is the first kind of order of business down in Dallas will be the Baseball Classic Era Committee, the Hall of Fame Committee, kind of like the Veterans Committee, Old Timers Committee, but this is players that primary contribution to the game was before 1980. So that committee will meet on Sunday night and make their evaluation of who, if anybody, to elect to the Hall of Fame. Of interest to the Cardinal fans, there's 2 guys on their ballot who will be under consideration. Not that I'm biased, but one of them is my all-time favorite players at boy growing up, Ken Boyer, third baseman, MVP in 1964, and Dick Allen also on that ballot. So it's a tough ballot to get onto. You have to crack 75% of the vote among that committee members, which is made up of current Hall of Famers, baseball executives, a couple of writers and historians on that committee. It seems like it's one of those groups where the people who usually get elected are somebody who has somebody on that committee really arguing, lobbying hard for their selection. So I don't know if anybody, there are a couple St. Louis connections on that committee this year, Ozzie Smith being one, but I don't know how much of a lobbying effort either one of those guys will get. So we'll know the answers to that on Sunday night about who has been elected to if anybody, to the Hall of Fame that will go in the next election cycle in July, along with whoever gets elected on the current writers ballot, which will be announced in January.
Yeah, it would be fun to see, one or both of those guys get a good look, right? So hopefully Ozzie and some of the other St. Louis connections can help push for them, and would be exciting.
Other Cardinal news from this week, we finally have a farm director. Larry Day of the Cleveland Guardians was named to that position. The Cardinals also filled a couple of the other minor league roles that they want to have. A director of performance that's coming over from the Giants and Dodgers, long-standing career, and then filled the job of director of pitching in the minor leagues with a man named Matt Pierpont, a young player who's a former pitcher in the Colorado organization, has had some success as a pitching coordinator with the Seattle Mariners. So Larry Day, of course, worked in Cleveland with Rob Solio, the new director of player development and assistant general manager. So obviously the connection there. So look forward to welcoming those guys to St. Louis when we get to spring training.
Some of these names may not mean anything to people listening to this show, but I think the most exciting thing to take away from this is the fact that the Cardinals are finally going outside of the organization to bring in new talent. We haven't done that in a long time. And, it's exciting to see that they're coming through on that. And so for the longest time, this team had gotten a little bit stagnant on the way that it was because we had just promoted people internally.
Correct.
And so the fact that we've gone outside of the organization to bring in new names and new blood, maybe this will change some of what we've been talking about with the reset and letting these younger kids play.
And I also think it's important that they're filling some of the jobs that they've had open for a long time. Some of these are new positions that they really haven't filled even before the pandemic. So the more people you have involved in, working together and coaching and instructing players, and there's going to be a lot more of those hires and positions to go as far as coordinating roles and roving instructors and things like that. So I do think that the future of the organization from that standpoint is a lot brighter now than it has been for the last couple of years.
For sure. And you look at some of these guys, the new pitching director has really done a lot with a lot of young, talented pitchers that he's helped bring throughout the years. And so I'm excited to see what he can do with some of these guys as we move through.
So obviously the Dallas winter meetings get started down in Dallas as we get here closer, but now into December. Don't forget, if you're looking for some kind of a Christmas gift, we have the Cardinals spring training party down in Florida, our great deal at the Homewood Suites on March the 11th. You can get in there and make a last-minute Christmas present for somebody on your Cardinal fan list if you're looking for a last-minute thing. So I can't encourage it highly enough to do that because we're going to be in Florida before long.
We are. It's going to be very exciting. And before we go any farther, I also want to take a moment to tell our listeners and congratulate you. It's time to congratulate Rob Raines for being nominated for he's one of the finalists for the Missouri Sports Writer of the Year Award. So it's a very cool and unique honor, and you have to be nominated by someone else that's in the sports writers committee. And so it's an exciting thing for him, and we want to say congrats.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Very unexpected, very surprised, but very, very humbling as well. So I appreciate it. Whoever nominated me, whoever voted for me to be in that position. So some good friends of mine who write for the Kansas City Star are the other finalists on that thing for the state of Missouri. So should also mention that your brother, BJ Raines, is up for the Idaho Sports Writer of the Year Award. He's had the honor of winning that several times in the past. So good luck to him as well. So that announcements will coming out after the first of the year. So again, obviously the Cardinals head to Dallas, kind of hoping to see what happens on the trade front, hoping for some news of some sort here from the meetings. I know sometimes we go down there to the winter meetings and not a lot happens, but hopefully that we'll have some action.
I think there will be news. Will it be Cardinals news is yet to be told, but there will be deals and people moving, which in turn is going to help the Cardinals or hurt the Cardinals depending on who ends up where, right?
Always will be fun to watch. And we'll have all the action covered for you here on STLSportsPage.com. Also follow us on X at Rob Raines, and we'll get you all the breaking news to you as it happens. Mike, thanks for the visit. We'll talk to everybody again soon here at the next edition of Raines on the Cardinals podcast on STL Sports.